All right, cheers, guys. Having a beer so I can tell the unfiltered truth of why I left the $170,000 paying doctor of pharmacy job, and it ain't pretty. So, my name's Jeff, I'm 33 now. I became a pharmacist at 25, but I've actually been in pharmacy since I was about 18. Started at a pharmacy down in Riverside, California, and I was just a clerk. It was awesome. I learned a lot, and during this time, I was actually in school at University of California, Riverside. I was studying biomedical sciences, and for me, I don't know if this is like, if I'm stereotyping, I'm pretty sure everyone's seen the jokes. Asians, they love to be, they love to encourage their kids to become doctors, and pharmacists are doctors. I'm sure you guys didn't know that. It's technically a doctorate, but we don't really refer to ourselves as doctors. It's like kind of like lawyers are doctors. Technically, they have their JD. Uh, Doctor of physical therapy. We don't, when we're in practice, we don't call each other doctor. The only people we really refer to as doctors are DOs and MDs, just mainly for patients and to make sure things are crystal clear about who patients think are their healthcare professionals. So if you imagine like you have patients like being treated, and you have a multidisciplinary team, and all of a sudden there's a doctor of physical therapy, a doctor of pharmacy there is an MD there, and then it just gets confusing. Like, oh, doctor, doctor, doctor. So for clarity's sake, yes, we have our doctors, but we don't address ourselves as doctors in the field. So yeah, I started in Riverside, California. Being Asian immigrant, my family always wanted me to become a doctor, and because they were there by, you know, and not blaming anyone first of all, like I think we did the best that we could have with what we knew at the time. This was back in um, 2009 when I first started college. For us, we knew doctors and people who had doctorates and were well educated as people who made a lot of money. They were respected. So my family encouraged me to do it. I was interning, or I guess a clerk, in pharmacy, and I liked it. I didn't hate the job. I love my coworkers. My mentors were great. They encouraged me also. So for that reason, I decided to keep on pursuing this. Lo and behold, though, I didn't realize like what it actually meant. So being 18, coming out of college, coming out of high school, you don't realize like 8 years is quite a long time. So by the time I got out, I would have been 25, and I just didn't really do the math. I was like, technically, some people die at 75, so I've already lived a third of my life if I were to graduate at 25, which is kind of crazy to think about. Um, so yeah, I worked at a pharmacy. I volunteered. I became president of organizations. I loved it. And then thankfully I was being pushed. I wasn't the best student. Here's one kind of crazy thing about pharmacy, or just like school in general. As long as you show improvement, most schools are willing to accept you as long as like you try your best and they see your participating organizations becoming a leader. But for me, I had less. I think I was like a 2.95 GPA. But what's crazy is my first year was really bad. So, typical like kid, I wanted to party, wanted to drink, meet girls, do all the fun stuff. And it didn't equate well to my grades. It showed. What's crazy is my third and fourth year actually kind of saved the day and all my extracurriculars. So I failed my first year or two, straight C's through like chemistry. Had to retake a chemistry class. Bio, not that great either. But again, like you realize as you get older, like even though like 18 to 20, these are like big development years for a lot of people. At least it was for me in college. And yeah, I was able to save myself third year. I started taking biochemistry classes. Instead of hitting the parties, I was hitting the books, hitting the libraries. And I put myself around people who actually wanted to be something. Um, and that itself was a big learning lesson for me, is like the proximity principle. Whatever you're around is like kind of what you become good at. And because I was around people who had these aspirations to become doctors, pharmacists, physical therapists, nurse practitioner, nurses, um, by default, I thought it was cool, and that's what I wanted to do. So we competed a little bit, like friendly competition. We try to help each other get into like different programs. Like we were advisors. We helped each other with our classes. We studied together. We did all nighters, and it was quite fun. So I pulled together, did my biochemistry classes, ended up acing a lot of them, and ended up doing research, and then plus volunteer work at like other pharmacies, and putting up together a really clean portfolio. Even though like the first year, it ended up turning into a really good story for um, the school. So when I did my applications my third year, I actually got quite a few interviews, surprisingly. So if anyone thinks it's too late, it's never too late. First of all, as long as you have the time, you have your health, you can turn things around. So don't give up. Long story short, I ended up getting accepted to a few schools, some in Arizona, some in California, and one in Colorado, and a few of my dream schools up north because they were 3-year programs. They would have been accelerated. And for me, by the time I was 21, 22-ish when I graduated, I started feeling the pressure a little bit. I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm technically halfway now. I've been accepted to a few schools. Like, what's going to make the most sense? I ended up going into a few interviews. I got accepted to one in California called Western. I don't know if I'm supposed to say school name, but great school. Just overall a little bit expensive for me. Got into a school in Arizona, and the dream school that I really wanted to go to was actually up north, called UOP. And I didn't get into that one, so unfortunately, I had a lot of friends go there, and they encouraged me to apply there. And it would have been really cool because it would have been in California, so I would have been able to stay with my family. And it would have been accelerated, so I would have been able to practice 1 year ahead, so I would have made an extra $100,000 versus like waiting an extra year and going through school. Luckily, though, I guess this is like a blessing in disguise. But I did get into a school I really want to go to, also in Colorado. Really wonderful school. Area is really fun. Got to meet some of my best friends there, and it was much more affordable. So coming out of it, we were only in around, I think, like 130 worth of debt, and yeah, it was just much better because I remember looking at my tuition for schools down in California. I was like $60,000 just for tuition, and that's not even including like rent and stuff for the area. Putting that all together, it could have been like easily thousands, like 70,000. Sorry. So yeah, I got into school, kept on interning, and long story short, I graduated thankfully. In the middle school, I actually thought I wanted to like continue education past my doctorate. But what's crazy too is like people don't realize here's like another like unseen risk side story of pharmacy school is that you can actually fail. So it's really expensive again to go to pharmacy school. And people are like, oh yeah, you just graduate. It's a straight path. For sure, you're going to make money. But it's not always the case. You know, pharmacy school is hard. Life comes into play. You know, not everyone's always ready. So sometimes you get held back. And if you get held back, it's unfortunately like a 20 to 30 to $50,000 mistake depending on how you play it out. And it's just like the discouragement and the stress that comes along with it too. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with like that, but just know that it's not an easy path. It does take a lot of studying. It is a full-time job when you decide to go to pharmacy school. Or I'm pretty sure any other like healthcare / doctorate school, it's gonna be a lot of hard work. So it's not anything easy. You're not gonna sit behind the computer and just fill medications or read stuff like everyone says pharmacy's like. But long story short, yeah, fast forward to the first 1 to 2 years, it was really tough. So many times where I thought I was gonna fail, but thankfully I just like made it by made it by a hair. I was like, oh, I failed this exam. Now I got to crush it on the final and make sure I pass. Thankfully, by then I've picked up a lot of good studying skills from undergrad, and I actually did do quite successful in pharmacy school. I think I had like a 3.7, 3.8. And you can't do like anything above a 4.0. It's not like college where you take like AP classes and get 5.0. So I was a pretty good student in pharmacy school. But my third year, I was like pretty burnt out. Still president of other organizations. Still didn't really think about finances at all. So right now I'm basically just going to the negative. Haven't made any money besides my intern work / like side job at the pharmacy. And maybe trying to start a small business. This is actually when I started my business venture of like trying to start blogs, becoming a YouTuber. I thought that was cool. Just like all the rage at the time. And lo and behold, I got to my third year and I was just so tired of school that I wasn't even sure if I was gonna make it. To be honest, I thought I was potentially gonna just leave, which would have been the hugest mistake ever. So I'm glad I didn't. First of all, because I only had about a year and a half left. But at this time, I've invested 4 years in my undergrad, plus 2 years in my doctorate school, and almost $100,000 worth of debt. So leaving would have been quite deadly, or financially, and it's hard to find a job that will make that much afterwards, especially if you're expecting to do that and you're going to all this debt. These loans don't get forgiven like homes and all that. But yeah, third year I decided not to do any postgraduate like residencies, which is definitely a possibility for pharmacists. So you can become like an oncology pharmacist, ambulatory care where you actually prescribe medicines. You can be an infectious disease, nuclear medicine. You can specialize in retail. Like you can actually take a residency in that. People don't realize that. But for me, after my third year, I was pretty much like pooped, and I was like, this is it. Like any more schooling was out of the question for me. I was ready to get to practice and finally make some money because I wanted to see what it was like. And honestly, residency from what I saw from all the options, you actually got paid less during most of the time I looked at the residencies. And even when you graduated, we didn't really make more. It was more for the opportunity to actually do the work that we wanted to do. So for me, I wanted to kind of do like infectious diseases or critical care pharmacy, but again, I didn't want to put in the work, so that's my fault. Maybe one day I can go back into it, but for now I'm putting that idea on hold as I'm trying to kind of get rid of take care of my finances. Excuse me. So I guess downsides of drinking beer and making a video. So yeah, I graduated after my 8 years of school, got out of debt. I ended up being like 130, 150 or so. Made I think like 130 out of the bat, but don't forget about taxes. So I worked in Colorado, and my first year was great. I was working a lot, and this is kind of where like the finances ideas started like coming to my mind. I started really deep diving. My blog business failed. My YouTube definitely like failed. It hasn't grown. I'm still here just with 1,500 followers, trying my best. I mean, obviously I'm still really happy because my Airbnb business is thankfully doing really well, so it's taking care of us financially. And if you guys didn't know, that, like, long story short, if I'm going to spoil it for you guys, I don't work in pharmacy full-time anymore thanks to this business. But yeah, back to the story. I worked in Colorado. I worked in the south side. I lived in this little small city called Pueblo, Colorado. And I actually really quite enjoyed it because I got to float everywhere. My company took care of me, paid my drive time, paid my meals for when I traveled, because I was a special pharmacist in the fact that I wanted to cover all of Colorado. So I would drive to places like Durango, Colorado, Cortez, Colorado, I forgot, gosh, what was it? There's a place eastern southern Colorado. I think it's like Logan, Colorado. Lamar, Colorado. Yeah, very quiet town, small town. And it was actually during this time where I really started to fall in love with like the small town feel and living on the countryside. But while I was doing so, learning all this stuff, getting better at my skills, making my first real money. I bought my dream car, Subaru Outback, 0% interest, 4 years financed, but it was very expensive. It was technically a financial mistake, but probably not, because it saved my life in snow. So it balances out. It snows kind of bad over there. So there have been times like, oh, if I still drove my old car, I'd probably be dead. So Subaru Outback, thank you for saving my life. So yeah, I was making about 130, but for like the first 3 months or so, it was really great. It's like learning, super stressful. Everything was like new. Like there's always a difference between theory and practice, like what you learn in school versus actually being the one responsible for dispensing medications. And once you like are the final check of like giving something to someone that's gonna affect them for their whole life, like it starts to feel real. It's like, oh shoot, I know something simple. It's like metformin. And I still remember my first time dispensing metformin. I was like, oh, 500 milligrams, 1 BID. Is this right? Are we supposed to taper up like we discussed and learned in school? So that was stressful because I was like, oh, we could get sued. We could lose all this money. We can go backwards. We could hurt someone gets sick. So there's just like so many like stressors that people don't realize about being in pharmacy. And honestly, like even being a clerk or technician or intern, you don't really feel that stress, just because technically you're not the one. You are kind of liable, but at the end of the day, the pharmacist is there to protect you and check you, and they are the final check. But yeah, so about 3 months in, I was like, man, this is good. I'm getting great. getting great feedback from all my mentors, my other pharmacist fellow colleagues. And but what I did notice was because I was getting better, everyone was asking me to work. So it was interesting because I was like salary hourly, where I can actually work past my 40. But I remember there was this one time in October where I made a lot of money. I worked pretty much like the whole month. I think I had like 3 days off, and I was so tired. I had the largest paychecks, but it was at this time where I started questioning, like, man, if I play this out for another 30, 35 years, 40 years, I definitely can't do what my parents did. They're much stronger than I am. You know, they're immigrants from another country. They can deal with anything. Is what I always say. But I personally couldn't do it, and I was tired. And it's at that time I started exploring other investments like not crypto, but stocks, like trading stocks. I lost a lot of money trading stocks, like $20,000, I think. Buying index funds, I actually made money in index funds, but it was just not enough. Like, I think I invested like 30,000. I was like, oh, cool, I'm up like $3,000 over the past like year or something, which is pretty good. But still not enough to like replace what I wanted to. And I was like, I need to get around to like $5 million if I want to like retire early, maybe have family, have kids, like I always imagined, and move on with my life. But again, like a life of just working 27 out of 31 days was not going to cut it for me, and I didn't want to save my waist out. So what was the next option? The next option I thought about was technically real estate. Like, my parents will have thankfully been doing real estate for quite a while, and I just didn't really realize what they were doing because they were pretty much just always working when we were younger, and I don't blame them for that too. I actually love it, and I appreciate the hard work, and I think it's instilled a lot of good work ethic for me, and it also helped me realize I can outwork almost any insecurity or any problems, which is really cool. So if you guys ever want a good piece of advice, you know, pick the right vehicle and work hard, and that will solve most of your problems. Friendly side piece of advice. So yeah, so after that I finished my time in Colorado for about a year, but I was like, I still have energy right now. I'm gonna work as much as I can. The company I worked for, thankfully, again, provided meals because I traveled everywhere, and hotels because, again, I was covering pharmacists who were sick. But I decided to move back to Greenville, South Carolina with my parents. And over there, I actually saved up a bunch of money from living with roommates back in Colorado. And it's like, hey, mom and dad, you know, like, how did you guys do? How did you guys retire early? Like, for me, you guys, when I see you guys had all the odds against you. You're immigrants, didn't really speak the language. How is it that you're able to retire early? And they just told me straight up, Jeff, let's go buy some real estate. So I took their advice, used all my money, and bought 2 homes in South Carolina for $135,000 on the same street, new construction, new builds, for $135,000 each. I used some primary home loans and I think it was a secondary home loan or conventional. Kind of forgot, but pretty much like spent all my $50,000 that I had saved. Kept on working for like another year and a half and saved up some more money. Fast forward about 7 years from now, those houses are pretty much almost tripled in price. And I've luckily had a tenant in the whole time, which is like pretty freaking amazing. So at first I thought I was gonna be like in trouble. I was like, man, how am I gonna manage tenants and stuff? And thankfully, having mentors like my parents, and not everyone's gonna have like the luck of having like really strong mentors as parents, you know. So get out there, go to the real estate meetups, chat with people who you trust and who have the heart of a teacher and that have your back, I'm hoping. So make those connections. And that's why they always say like business and real estate networking matters so much. So yeah, thankfully I got those deals, and I was like, oh, they're cashing about $100 to $500 every single month. This is pretty cool. But I'm gonna have to buy like 20 more to basically replace my pharmacy income, so it wasn't gonna work. But at this time, I was also exploring things like bigger pockets, and going to these real estate meetups while working my pharmacist job, eating peanut butter and jellies, living with my parents, saving a lot of money. And I ended up buying my first kind of like fix and flip, because I've been like hearing so many stories about people doing this for like decades and doing great. So I bought my first undervalued deal, I guess is what you call it, and we negotiated well because the landlord or the seller was asking $70,000, and then with the help of my parents, my mentors again, they're like, Jeff, you should offer $20,000, see if they take it. They didn't take 20, but they took 30. So I got my first fixture upper for $30,000. Had a lot of problems with it renting too, and had a little bit of problems with the partnership also. Um, so another thing is like if you ever have partnerships, just make sure you have everything on paper, like what you're gonna do and how to exit, and how to buy, or just have a really good partner. If you have a really good partner, things are just much easier. And luckily, I had a really good partner. It was my brother. Love you, John. uh, so yeah, we had a little bit of trouble like getting renters. Um, but at the end of the day, when I did end up like getting it a bird, which is buy, rehab, rent, um, buy, rehab, rented, we refinanced it, and it ended up being worth like $150. So imagine me like working so hard in pharmacy every single year for like 130, my best year 170, and then just doing one flip that took me like a month to kind of work on, and essentially I made like $90,000 because I put in $30,000 into the fix too. So it's 150 minus 60,000. I ended up buying 3 of these homes. It worked out extremely well. So a really good play. But the problem is when I refinanced, it actually killed my cash flow. So I was like, well, I have like all this money. I have like $200,000 because I did a cash out refinance. Now what do I do with it? It was at this time I actually decided to move to California, bought a condo, and started exploring a little bit. I joined a mastermind with my friends who are still my really good friends, all big investors. We do everything from like crypto, bonds, talk about markets, talk about different real estate investing strategies. And it was with one of my really good friends who's partnering out, and we still do business together, where we explored our first Airbnb in Joshua Tree. That was at this time in like 2021 when it was all the rage to invest in Joshua Tree. And it was freaking crazy. We went half on this home, and I think for like the first year, every single month was pulling in like $8,000 to $12,000, and we were like, this is insane. So me buying this one home was kind of like what spurred my current strategy, which I'll talk about in a second very briefly. But yeah, I was in California, living it up, bought this place in Joshua Tree. You know, like I gotta go buy more of these, because if I don't have to buy 20 short-term 20 like long-term rentals, this is gonna save me so much time. I just have to buy like 2 more of these to replace my pharmacy income, because you end up keeping only around 60% of the income from an Airbnb, like the gross income. So even if you make $100,000, probably keep around 40, and that depends on whether you manage yourself. If you hire property managers, even less, like maybe like you keep 20% of the gross income. So keep that in mind. Ended up selling that place, that condo we had in Oceanside. Ended up buying a 5-unit down in San Diego a little bit later on. But during that time in between there, we actually bought 2 more short-term rentals in West Virginia, and they did so freaking well. Like for the same for like a quarter of the price of the homes in California. So keep in mind, my home in San Diego was $860,000. My homes in West Virginia were around. No, I know it's not around. It was 182,500, and the other one was like 235. We got those places up and running. Used vacation home loans, and we used I think like a 25% down loan on another one, just because that was the option available to us. And they were making pretty much the same amount as our Joshua Tree home, so we were pulling in around like $7,000 to like $15,000 a month on good months, and each one makes out at least $70,000. And I was like, wow. So for an investment of like $50,000, we're getting the same returns as our one in San Diego. And that's when I was like, man, if I keep on working my pharmacy job, I'm going to be able to fund a few more of these and do quite well. It was around this time, honestly, that I was actually financially like free and I could retire. So I actually did take a little bit of a break for some personal reasons that we're not going to get into this time, because this video is getting super long. But I ended up doing some more of these deals. I got another cabin up there that is projected to do around $100,000. Started getting a lot of my friends and family into the business also. Bought a couple more deals down in South Carolina where I was originally, and actually started doing some arbitrage deals too, which I don't really chat too much about. But these real estate investment deals are probably the best thing I can think of actually getting you financially free. And now, like moving forward now, 2024, I'm pulling in like I think it's like $30,000 to like $50,000 every single month from these short-term rentals, and we're adding more pretty quickly. In addition to that, we started our own business too. That's compounding, and it's all happened because I started working again like in pharmacy and slowly like pushing away and like leaning towards business, and pretty much just doing whatever makes the most money at the time, what makes the most sense. So if you're ever like a pharmacist or like a doctor and you're getting tired of your job, because it's honestly around this time, like like 7 to 15 years is where I've noticed like I start getting burnt out of things because my third year in pharmacy school, that was around the 7 year mark, and I was like tired. I was like, this is getting a little bit monotonous, and like a little bit of like change and growth will make me excited. But by the time it was like 15 years, I was no longer that inspired, honestly, by pharmacy because had no desire to climb the corporate ladder. Um, because just the path there just seemed so long. I wanted to have kids of my own. I wanted to have a family. I wanted to be able to support my wife, and I wanted to travel the world. So having a 60-hour work week, 40-hour work week was just not in the cards for me personally, and I don't think it's in the cards for too many people. I think they'll end up being very unhappy, most cases, or they'll just get eventually bored and they'll want to try something different. And then at the end of the day, like I feel like some people just end up being there for the paycheck. And that's why I think again, like keep your options open, save some money. Personal finance at the end of the day is like the most important thing. If you can save more than you spend and learn to invest the rest while keeping some reserves, you're going to be in a really good financial position. So as a pharmacist, healthcare professional, don't spend all your money right now. Don't go crazy like I did when I first graduated and bought that Subaru Outback. If you can and you're in a better position to buy something affordable, buy the assets first, buy the homes first. Don't be like me and buy the liability, even though that car probably did save my life. So maybe I'll redact that statement. But buy what makes sense financially. Take care of yourself. Start working towards your million so you don't have to be working for your first $100,000 when you're 35 or 33 years old like me.